A mother's love. Maria's hands moved with a practiced ease, guiding the comb through Kayla's dark curls, careful not to tug too hard. The soft scent of lavender shampoo lingered in the air, mingling with the smell of freshly brewed coffee. The kitchen was bathed in the early morning light, the sun casting golden beams through the window, making everything feel warm and comforting. As the comb traced each curl, Maria's thoughts wandered to a time not long ago, when Kayla had entered her life, a fragile, broken soul, unsure of where she belonged. Kayla sat at the kitchen table, her eyes still heavy with sleep, but sparkling with the soft promise of a new day. Maria admired how far Kayla had come since that first day they met. The little girl who had arrived in her care, with wide, scared eyes and a trembling heart, had slowly transformed into the smiling, bright soul before her now. The change hadn't come overnight. It had been a process filled with patience, kindness, and more than a few tearful nights. But they had made it through, and Maria was determined to protect that happiness, no matter the cost. "There we go, sweetie," Maria said, tying off the braid with a bright, colorful hair tie, the same one Kayla always picked out. She smiled as Kayla reached up and touched it, a small giggle escaping her lips. Kayla turned around, her small arms wrapping around Maria's waist in a hug. She felt so tiny in Maria's arms, but at the same time, Maria knew the girl was growing in ways that were far beyond her years. "Thanks, Mom," Kayla mumbled, her voice muffled as her face rested against Maria's soft sweater. Maria held her close, her own heart swelling at the sound of the word that had become so precious to her. Mom. Not foster mom, not guardian, but mom. The simple word felt like a promise, an unspoken vow that they were in this together. She ran her fingers through Kayla's hair, savoring the moment. She could still feel the warmth of the little girl in her arms, and in that moment, the outside world, filled with its struggles and uncertainties, seemed to disappear. As Kayla stepped back, stretching her arms and yawning, Maria busied herself with preparing breakfast. The familiar sound of cereal being poured into a bowl, the steady clink of the spoon as it stirred the milk, seemed almost rhythmic in the early morning calm. "Your favorite," Maria said as she slid the bowl in front of Kayla, who was still rubbing her eyes. Kayla blinked a few times, then grinned. "Thanks, Mom." She took a big bite, her eyes lighting up with happiness at the familiar taste. Maria sat down at the table across from her, watching her daughter with a soft smile. It wasn't lost on her how simple moments like this, quiet mornings, shared meals, tender touches, had become the foundation of their bond. It was a love built on trust, slowly woven together over the past year. Her mind wandered to the day she had first met Kayla. It felt like a lifetime ago, yet the memories were still fresh in her mind. Kayla had arrived at her door with nothing but a small backpack filled with a few clothes, a worn teddy bear, and a heart full of fear. Her biological mother had been unable to care for her, caught in the throes of addiction, and unable to provide the safety and stability a child needed. Kayla had been through so much in her short life, too much for anyone, let alone someone so young. The system had placed Kayla in foster care when it became clear that her mother could not provide for her, and Maria had been chosen to be her temporary guardian. At first, it had felt like a fragile arrangement. Maria had no idea what she was getting into when she signed up to foster a child. Could she handle the emotional strain? Could she truly help heal this little girl's heart? But as soon as she saw Kayla's face, something inside her clicked. She knew that she was meant to care for this child, to offer her the love and protection that she so desperately needed. She had promised herself that she would give her the best life she could. And that promise had carried her through the sleepless nights, the difficult days, and the moments of doubt. Kayla's smile today was a testament to how far they had come. The girl had begun to heal, piece by piece, like a delicate puzzle coming together. Her laughter filled their home now, and she no longer looked at the world with the same uncertainty. Instead, she faced each day with hope, with curiosity, with a willingness to embrace life. Maria knew that the journey wasn't over. Kayla's past would always be a part of her, and there would be challenges ahead. But Maria was determined to face those challenges head-on, alongside her daughter. "So, what do you want to do today?" Maria asked as she watched Kayla pour milk into her bowl. Kayla paused for a moment, looking up at her with a thoughtful expression. "Can we go to the park later? Maybe I can ride my bike." Maria smiled, nodding. "Of course. You've been practicing so hard. I think today's the day you'll finally ride without training wheels." Kayla's face lit up with excitement. "Really? You think I can do it?" "I know you can," Maria said, her voice full of confidence. "You've got the determination in you, just like always." The words seemed to settle in Kayla's heart as she took another bite of cereal, her mind already drifting toward the excitement of the day ahead. But for Maria, those words held more meaning than she realized. Determination. It was a trait that had defined her entire journey with Kayla, and it was something that would carry them both forward. As the meal ended, Maria and Kayla went through their morning routine, getting dressed and ready for the day. Kayla's school bag was slung over her shoulder, her shoes tied tightly. Maria watched her with pride, seeing how much she had grown since that first day when she had barely been able to trust anyone. But deep in Maria's heart, there was a nagging thought, one that she had been trying to push aside. She knew that the court date was coming up, the one that would determine Kayla's future. Would the system agree that she was the right person to continue caring for Kayla? Or would her biological family be able to take her back? The uncertainty weighed heavily on Maria's mind. She knew that the possibility of losing Kayla was very real. The legal system was a maze of rules and regulations, and Maria had no guarantees. All she could do was wait and hope. As they walked out the door to the car, Kayla skipping alongside her, Maria's thoughts lingered on the future. She would fight with everything she had to keep Kayla safe, to keep her where she belonged. But she also knew that no matter the outcome, she had already given Kayla something that no court ruling could ever take away: love, trust, and the belief that no matter what, they would always be there for each other. "Let's go, champ," Maria said with a smile, shaking off her worries for the moment. Kayla grinned up at her, her backpack bouncing against her back. "Race you to the car." Maria laughed, feeling her heart lift. "You're on, kiddo." As they drove off toward the school, the sun shining bright above them, Maria made a promise to herself. Whatever came next, she would make sure that Kayla's light would never fade. She had fought for her in ways she never thought possible, and she would continue to fight for as long as it took. Kayla was her daughter, and Maria was her mother, and no matter the world's challenges, their love would always be enough to carry them through. The courtroom. The courthouse loomed ahead, its gray stone exterior a stark contrast to the warmth of the morning sun. The massive building, towering above the smaller structures surrounding it, seemed to have a presence of its own, a reminder of the weight of the decisions that took place inside. The steps leading up to the courthouse were worn with time, each one carrying the echoes of countless people walking to meet their futures, uncertain of what lay ahead. Maria's heart raced as she approached the entrance with Kayla by her side. She had prepared for this day, steeling herself against the emotional turmoil that would surely come with it, but now that the moment had arrived, it felt as though her entire world was teetering on the edge. The thought of losing Kayla, of being told that she wasn't enough to keep her, was an overwhelming weight on her chest. Kayla was unusually quiet, her small hand clutching Maria's tightly, as if the simple act of holding on could shield her from the uncertainty that hung in the air. She glanced up at Maria with wide eyes, her face pale and uncertain. Maria could feel the tension radiating from the little girl, the fear that clung to her despite her best efforts to stay brave. "It's okay, honey," Maria whispered, squeezing Kayla's hand gently. "We're going to be fine. No matter what happens today, I'll always be here for you." Kayla nodded but didn't speak. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts that Maria couldn't fully understand. Thoughts of a mother she had never truly known, and of a future that seemed so far out of reach. Maria could sense the weight of the little girl's worry, and it tore at her heart. She wished she could make the fear disappear, but all she could do was be there, to stand by her side and offer comfort. They passed through the courthouse security, the metal detectors and guards doing little to ease the nerves that gripped Maria's chest. The corridors were vast and echoing, and the walls seemed to close in as they walked toward the courtroom. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the emptiness, a constant reminder of the looming battle that awaited them. When they reached the door of the courtroom, Maria hesitated. She looked down at Kayla, who had gone silent, her eyes fixed on the floor. There was no turning back now. They had arrived, and now they had to face the storm. Maria took a deep breath, exhaling slowly to steady her nerves. She knew the girl beside her was counting on her strength, and in that moment, she realized that strength wasn't just about fighting for what you wanted. It was about giving someone the confidence to stand tall in the face of fear. Kayla looked up at her, her small face lined with worry. "Mom, what if the judge says I have to go back to them? What if she says I can't stay with you?" Maria's heart cracked, but she kept her voice steady, her hand still firmly holding Kayla's. "Sweetheart, I won't let that happen. You're my daughter now. No one can take that away from us. We'll fight together." Kayla gave a faint smile, but the fear was still there, lingering in her eyes. Maria opened the door to the courtroom, and the overwhelming atmosphere hit them immediately. The room was large and imposing, filled with people who seemed to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. The wooden benches were lined with people, lawyers, social workers, and family members. In the front, Judge Helen Lawrence sat at her desk, her gaze sharp and intense as she scanned the room. Her reputation as a no-nonsense judge had preceded her, and Maria knew that she would be tough, unwilling to be swayed by sentiment. It was business, not emotion, to her. "Please take a seat," one of the bailiffs said as he gestured toward the empty row in front of the judge. Maria led Kayla to the row, her steps steady but her heart pounding. Kayla sat down beside her, her small frame so fragile in the large courtroom. Maria wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close, as though the simple act of holding her could protect her from the gravity of the moment. They sat in silence, waiting for the proceedings to begin, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Judge Helen's gavel rang out, and the room fell into a hush. "We are gathered today to determine the future of Kayla Williams," the judge announced in her authoritative voice. "This hearing will determine whether the child remains in the care of her foster mother, Maria Williams, or whether she will be returned to her biological family. Let's begin." The lawyers stood, each prepared to present their arguments. Kayla's biological family had hired a lawyer to argue for their custody, claiming that they had overcome the challenges that had led to their separation, and that they now had the resources to provide a stable home for Kayla. Maria's lawyer, a quiet yet confident woman named Sarah, rose to defend the case for Kayla remaining with Maria. Maria's lawyer began by laying out the facts. Kayla had been in Maria's care for over a year, during which time she had made remarkable progress emotionally and academically. Maria had given Kayla a stable, loving home, something that her biological family had been unable to provide. There was no question that Kayla had flourished under Maria's care. But the other side of the argument was equally strong. Kayla's biological mother, who had been absent from her life for much of her early childhood due to addiction and personal struggles, had shown genuine effort toward turning her life around. She had completed rehabilitation and had maintained stable employment for the past several months. Her lawyer argued that she had the right to regain custody of her daughter, and that Kayla deserved the chance to reconnect with her birth family. The room was filled with arguments, each side fighting for the same thing: what was best for Kayla. The hours seemed to drag on, and the weight of the decision in the judge's hands was palpable. Maria listened to the arguments, trying to stay focused on the facts. She knew the case was complicated, that the legal system was a maze of rules and procedures, and she couldn't help but feel as though she was losing her grip on the future she had worked so hard to build for Kayla. The opposing lawyer, a tall man with sharp features, argued that the bond between Kayla and her biological family could not be overlooked, that it was natural for a child to want to reconnect with her roots. He spoke with a level of authority that made Maria's heart sink. What if the judge was swayed by his words? What if, despite everything Maria had done for Kayla, the judge decided that the ties of blood were stronger than the love she had built? Kayla shifted nervously beside her, her eyes flicking from one lawyer to the other. Maria could see the tension in the little girl's body, the uncertainty in her face. Kayla was too young to fully understand what was happening, but she understood enough to know that the outcome of this day could change everything. As the opposing lawyer finished his argument, the room grew quiet. The judge nodded, her expression unreadable, as she prepared to make her decision. Maria could feel the weight of the moment settle over her like a heavy blanket. All she could do was hope that the judge would see what she saw, that Kayla had found a home with her, that Maria was more than just a foster mother. She was the person who loved Kayla unconditionally, the person who had fought for her when no one else would. But then, just as Maria's nerves were on the verge of snapping, something unexpected happened. The bailiff entered the room holding a small envelope. The judge's gaze shifted toward it, her eyes narrowing as she took the envelope from the officer. The room held its breath as she opened it. "What is this?" the judge muttered to herself, her voice barely audible. She read the contents of the letter quickly, her brow furrowing as she processed the information. Then, to everyone's surprise, the judge stood up and motioned for a brief recess. The air in the courtroom seemed to shift in an instant. No one knew what was going on, but the letter had clearly had an impact. Maria's heart skipped a beat. What was in that letter? Why had the judge reacted like that? Her mind raced, but she had no answers. As they stood up and left the room for the recess, Maria found herself pulling Kayla into a quiet corner, her mind filled with unanswered questions. Do you think this is going to be okay?" Kayla asked, her voice trembling slightly. Maria looked down at the girl, her heart aching. "I don't know, honey," she said softly, her voice steady despite the uncertainty. "But I'll be here, no matter what." Kayla nodded, holding on to Maria as though her world depended on it. And in that moment, Maria knew that no matter what happened next, she had already given Kayla something more valuable than anything a judge could decide: love, trust, and the promise of a family that would always be there. The letter. The courtroom buzzed with hushed whispers as the recess continued. The soft murmur of conversations filled the air, but Maria could barely focus on the noise. Her mind was consumed by the events that had just unfolded. What could have been in that letter? What had caused Judge Helen's reaction, one that was both swift and unsettling? Her heart beat faster with each passing second, the uncertainty gnawing at her. Maria gently guided Kayla to a quiet bench near the hallway. Kayla's small fingers gripped the hem of Maria's jacket, her eyes wide with apprehension. The girl was doing her best to stay calm, but Maria could feel the subtle tremors of her nervousness. "Do you think they'll make us leave?" Kayla whispered, her voice tight with worry. Maria sighed, running a hand through her hair. She wanted to reassure Kayla, to tell her that everything would be fine, but she couldn't bring herself to lie. This was the hardest part of being a parent, she realized. The fear of not knowing if she could protect her child from the world's uncertainties. All she could offer was the quiet comfort of her presence. "No matter what happens, Kayla, I'm here. You're not alone," Maria whispered, leaning down to meet Kayla's gaze. She wiped a loose strand of hair from Kayla's face and gave her a soft smile. But inside, Maria's own heart felt like it was shattering. How could she keep this little girl safe if the very system meant to protect her threatened to pull her away? As they sat in silence, the door to the courtroom opened and Judge Helen reappeared. She stood tall in her black robe, her eyes fixed ahead, seemingly lost in thought. Her expression was unreadable, though there was a certain tension in her posture that hadn't been there before. She motioned for everyone to return to their seats. Maria took Kayla's hand, squeezing it gently before standing and guiding her back toward the room. As they walked in, Maria caught a glimpse of the letter on the judge's desk, resting open, its contents no longer a mystery. She could see the judge's fingers lightly trace the edges of the paper, as if weighing the decision it could bring. Judge Helen stepped back to her place, her gaze sweeping the room as the final moments of this pivotal day approached. "Please, everyone, take your seats." The judge's voice rang out with authority, signaling the end of the recess. She looked toward Maria and Kayla, her eyes softening just for a moment before she cleared her throat and addressed the room. "After reviewing the contents of the letter, I have come to a decision," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But before I announce my ruling, I want to clarify that this decision has not been made lightly. I am fully aware of the weight of my words and the impact they will have on a child's future. That is why I have taken extra care to ensure that every possible factor has been considered." The room fell silent as Judge Helen paused, her eyes scanning the faces of everyone present. For the first time, Maria noticed that the judge's expression had shifted. There was something in her eyes that hinted at empathy, something Maria had not expected. "The letter," Judge Helen continued, "was a personal statement from Kayla's biological mother, Leila Williams. It was not submitted by her lawyer, nor was it something we had anticipated. In it, Leila confessed to a great deal of personal hardship and mistakes, but what stood out most was her request." The room seemed to hold its breath. Maria's heart pounded in her chest, each beat reverberating with anticipation. What had Leila written? What was the judge about to reveal? "Leila Williams is not asking for custody of her daughter," Judge Helen said, her voice low, as if choosing each word carefully. "Instead, she has asked that Kayla remain with her foster mother, Maria Williams. She acknowledges that she is not in a place to offer the stability and love Kayla needs, and has made the difficult decision to relinquish her parental rights. She wants what is best for Kayla. And that, according to her own words, is for Kayla to stay in the home that has given her the love and care she deserves." Maria's breath caught in her throat. She glanced down at Kayla, whose eyes were now wide with confusion. For a brief moment, Maria couldn't process the words. Was this real? Could it be true that Leila, the woman who had once given birth to Kayla, had voluntarily stepped aside? Maria didn't know how to feel. Relief, disbelief, sadness. So many emotions swirled within her, but there was no time to sort through them. Judge Helen continued, her voice steady. "This letter changes the course of this case. It tells me that Leila Williams, despite her past, has come to a place of clarity and self-awareness. She has made the ultimate sacrifice for her daughter. I have reviewed the evidence of Maria Williams' care for Kayla, and I have no doubt that Kayla's best interests have been met here." Maria's heart seemed to rise in her throat, and her hands shook as she clasped them together tightly. Her mind struggled to grasp what was happening. Was it really over? Was Kayla truly going to stay with her? The judge glanced at Maria and Kayla before returning her gaze to the room. "With the new information from Leila Williams' letter, the decision is clear. The court rules that Kayla Williams will remain in the custody of Maria Williams, her foster mother, who has provided her with a stable, loving home. The request for reunification with Kayla's biological family has been denied." A wave of emotion swept over Maria, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. The room seemed to spin, her world suddenly going still and quiet. She looked down at Kayla, whose face had lit up with a smile of pure relief, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Maria reached down and pulled her into an embrace, unable to hold back her own tears. "Thank you," Kayla whispered into her ear. "I knew it was going to be okay. You're my mom." Maria's heart swelled with a love so intense that it almost felt overwhelming. "You're my daughter, Kayla," she whispered back, choking on the words. "Always and forever." As the courtroom settled into a quiet hum of conversation, Maria realized that the journey ahead was still uncertain. There would be challenges, there would be adjustments, and the past would always remain a part of them. But in that moment, Maria knew that they had won something more precious than she could have ever imagined. the chance to continue building the life they had dreamed of together. Judge Helen's gavel came down once more, signaling the end of the hearing. The decision had been made, and though there was still much work to be done, the hardest part was over. Maria had won Kayla's future, and they could now begin to move forward together. As they left the courtroom, Kayla looked up at Maria, her face bright with happiness. "Mom, can we go get ice cream? You know, to celebrate." Maria laughed through her tears, nodding. "Ice cream sounds perfect, kiddo. We got a lot to celebrate." And as they stepped into the bright, sunlit day, Maria knew that no matter what the world threw at them, they had already fought the hardest battle. The future was theirs to build, and together, they would make it stronger than ever. New beginnings. The sound of the gavel striking the wood echoed in Maria's ears long after the courtroom had emptied. The decision had been made, and the weight of that decision lingered in the air, both heavy and light all at once. Kayla's small hand rested in hers as they left the courthouse, walking into the bright afternoon sunlight. The world seemed to be spinning in a strange way, faster, but more hopeful. For the first time in what felt like forever, Maria allowed herself to breathe. She had won. Kayla was hers. But despite the relief that flooded her chest, there was still a quiet sense of disbelief. Could it really be over? Could she really, truly call herself Kayla's mom? The little girl who had once walked into her life like a lost star had become her center. The past year had been filled with love, laughter, tears, and hope. Maria had worked so hard to build a life for Kayla, a life where the little girl could thrive, feel loved, and feel safe. And now, the court had officially validated that Kayla was staying with her. "I can't believe it's real," Maria whispered to Kayla as they walked through the parking lot toward their car. The weight of the words still felt foreign, but it was a foreignness she welcomed. Kayla squeezed her hand and looked up at her with a smile that seemed to stretch all the way to her eyes. "It is real, Mom. It's real, and I'm not going anywhere." Maria smiled through the lump in her throat, fighting back the tears that threatened to overwhelm her. This moment, this little exchange, was everything. It was the culmination of years of struggle, of fighting for the things that mattered most. It was a new beginning, not just for Kayla, but for Maria as well. She had been given a second chance, a chance to do things right, to create the family she had always dreamed of. As they drove away from the courthouse, the world outside seemed to shimmer with new possibilities. Maria kept her eyes on the road, but her thoughts kept drifting back to that moment in the courtroom when the judge had announced the decision. She remembered the feeling of Kayla's small arms around her, the weight of the girl's trust and love filling the space between them. It was a feeling Maria had never known before, and it was one she would protect with everything she had. When they reached home, the house was quiet. It was a modest home, a little old and worn in places, but it was theirs. Maria had worked hard to make it a place where Kayla could feel safe and loved. The living room was warm, the smell of freshly baked cookies filling the air, a small comfort after the long day. They stepped inside, and Maria put her keys down on the kitchen counter, her eyes scanning the room. Kayla dropped her backpack by the door and ran over to the couch, sitting down and bouncing slightly with excitement. "What now, Mom? What's next?" Maria laughed softly, moving to sit beside her. "Well, first, I think we need to eat some ice cream, like we promised." Kayla's face lit up. "Yes, ice cream." Maria smiled, her heart swelling with joy. It was a simple thing, ice cream, but for them, it felt like a grand celebration. She was so proud of Kayla, so proud of the little girl who had grown so much, who had fought through so much adversity, and who now had the chance to grow even more, surrounded by love. But as they prepared to indulge in their ice cream celebration, Maria's thoughts once again returned to Leela. The letter Leela had written, though it had made all the difference, was a reminder of the complicated nature of Kayla's past. Maria had read it over several times in the days since the court session, trying to understand what had led Leila to make such a drastic decision. To voluntarily relinquish her parental rights was no easy feat, especially for someone who had spent so many years fighting for what she had lost. There had been pain in Leela's words, but there had also been something else. Hope. Hope that Kayla would have a future she could not provide. And Maria couldn't help but respect that. But Maria also knew that Leela's decision didn't erase the years of hardship Kayla had endured. There was still much to unpack, so much healing to do. Maria couldn't erase the past for Kayla, and she didn't try to. But she would be there for the future, every step of the way. They would heal together. As she set 2 bowls of ice cream down on the table, Maria smiled at Kayla, who was now digging into her bowl with the kind of enthusiasm that only a child could muster after such a monumental day. "So, what's next for us?" Maria asked, taking the seat beside her. Kayla stopped for a moment, licking a bit of chocolate from her spoon, her eyes shining. "We're going to go to the park tomorrow, right? We're going to do all the things I've wanted to do. We'll get a dog. And maybe you can help me with my schoolwork too." Maria chuckled, her heart light. "We can definitely go to the park. And we'll think about the dog. But the schoolwork sounds like a good idea. We'll work on that together, okay?" Kayla nodded eagerly, her eyes full of hope. "Thanks, Mom." Maria reached over and tucked a lock of Kayla's hair behind her ear, her heart swelling once again. "No, thank you. You make me proud every single day." The evening wore on, and as the night grew darker, Maria found herself reflecting on the day's events. There was so much she still wanted to do for Kayla, so many ways she wanted to help her heal and grow, but there was one thing she knew for sure. No matter what happened, she would never stop fighting for Kayla's future. She had won this battle, but there were many more ahead. It was a fight Maria would face with love, with patience, and with an unwavering commitment to the little girl sitting beside her. As the night settled in and Kayla snuggled up on the couch, Maria couldn't help but think about the journey ahead. They were still healing, still learning what it meant to be a family. There would be struggles, undoubtedly. There would be moments of doubt and fear, but there would also be laughter, joy, and love. Maria had already learned that the greatest gift she could give Kayla was her unwavering support. That was a promise she would keep, no matter the obstacles they faced. And as she watched Kayla drift off to sleep beside her, Maria whispered softly, almost to herself, "I love you, sweetheart. We're going to make it through this, together." The future felt open, full of possibility. There would be no more uncertainty, no more fighting to hold on. For the first time in a long while, Maria knew that they could move forward with hope. Kayla had a family now, a mother who would fight for her, protect her, and love her with everything she had. The new beginning they had both dreamed of was just the start, healing wounds. The next few days unfolded with a rhythm of quiet joy. Kayla and Maria spent the early mornings together, sitting at the kitchen table while the sunlight filtered through the window, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch with endless possibility. They shared breakfast in their small but cozy kitchen, where laughter mingled with the sound of spoons clinking against cereal bowls. There was a newfound comfort in these ordinary moments, a sense of peace that neither of them had felt in such a long time. But beneath the calm surface, there were layers of tension still waiting to be addressed. Kayla had been through so much. The court battle, the uncertainty about her future, the life she had once lived before Maria had come into her world. It was all still there, hidden in the corners of her heart, waiting to be healed. Maria knew this was just the beginning of a long journey. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. Kayla needed time to adjust, to feel safe in the space they had created together. And Maria needed time to learn how to be the mother Kayla deserved, how to understand the little things that could help her heal. After breakfast one morning, Maria set aside a few hours to take Kayla to the park. As promised, they had spent the last few months talking about going, about the swings Kayla loved, and the ice cream they would get afterward. It was something small, but it meant the world to them both. Kayla's excitement was palpable as she ran ahead, her small legs carrying her quickly over the grass. "Catch me, Mom," she called, her voice full of laughter. Maria laughed too, taking off after her. It was a simple game, but it was their game, one that held the weight of so many unspoken words. Maria caught up to Kayla just as she reached the swings, her feet barely touching the ground as she soared through the air, giggling. "You're fast, kiddo," Maria said, breathless but smiling. Kayla grinned back, her face full of joy. "I know. I'm gonna fly one day, Mom. I'm gonna fly higher than anyone." Maria's heart swelled at the sound of Kayla's enthusiasm. For a brief moment, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make it through everything together. But then, as Kayla continued to swing, her face shifted for a moment, her gaze growing distant. Maria watched as the energy seemed to drain from Kayla's expression. It was a subtle change, one that most would have missed, but Maria knew her daughter too well now to ignore it. Kayla stopped swinging and jumped off the seat, her feet hitting the ground with a soft thud. "Mom," Kayla said quietly, her eyes downcast. Maria quickly walked over to her, kneeling down so she was at eye level with her daughter. She gently placed a hand on Kayla's shoulder, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "What's going on, sweetheart?" Kayla hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I was thinking, what if my real mom, what if she wanted to come back? What if she tries to take me away from you?" The question hit Maria like a punch to the gut. She had been prepared for difficult conversations, but this moment, felt like a crack in their fragile peace. Kayla's fear was real, and it was one that Maria knew would need to be addressed carefully. The little girl wasn't just afraid of losing the life they had built together. She was also grieving for a mother she had never really known but still longed for in ways Maria couldn't fully understand. Maria took a deep breath, her heart aching. She cupped Kayla's face in her hands, making sure the girl was looking at her. "Kayla," she began, her voice soft but steady, "I'm not going anywhere. And no one is going to take you away from me. You're my daughter, and no matter what happens, that will never change. Do you hear me?" Kayla nodded slowly, her lips trembling. "But what if? What if I miss her?" Maria's heart cracked at the rawness of the question. She knew that the little girl in front of her was not just speaking about the woman who had given birth to her. She was speaking about the idea of family, of belonging, of a love that was meant to be unconditional but had been broken. Maria could feel Kayla's grief, and it was a weight she wasn't sure how to carry for her. "It's okay to miss her, Kayla. I understand," Maria said softly, "but it's also okay to love me too. You can love both of us, and that doesn't change the fact that I'm here, right now, and I'm not going anywhere." Kayla sniffled, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'm scared, Mom. I don't want to hurt you." Maria pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly as if she could protect her from all the pain in the world. "You're not hurting me, sweetheart. You're not hurting anyone. You're allowed to have all these feelings. You're allowed to miss your mom, and you're allowed to love me. It's okay to feel both things, I promise." Kayla clung to her, her small body shaking with emotion. Maria let her cry, letting the tears fall without trying to stop them. Sometimes, there were no words to fix the hurt. All she could do was be there, offering the solace of her presence. She knew that Kayla's journey was far from over, and Maria's role in it would change over time. But for now, she would be the safe place Kayla needed. As the sobs began to quiet, Kayla pulled back slightly and looked up at her with tear-streaked cheeks. "I don't want to forget her, Mom. I don't want to forget where I came from." Maria's heart shattered at that. She pulled Kayla back into her arms and kissed the top of her head. "You won't forget, sweetheart. You'll always have the memories, and I'll help you carry them. But that doesn't mean we can't make new ones together, ones that are just as important, just as real." Kayla nodded, sniffling one last time before wiping her eyes. "Okay, Mom. I'll try." Maria smiled gently, wiping the last tear from Kayla's cheek. That's all I can ask. Now, how about we get that ice cream we promised? Kayla's face brightened instantly. Yes, chocolate chip cookie dough, please. Chocolate chip cookie dough it is, Maria agreed, offering a playful wink. But next time, I get to pick the flavor. As they walked hand in hand to the car, Maria felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. It wasn't always going to be easy. There would be moments of doubt and pain. But there would also be moments like this. Moments where the love they shared could overcome anything. Kayla wasn't just Maria's daughter in name. She was hers in every sense of the word, and nothing would ever change that. Maria's love for her was fierce, and she would carry that love like armor, shielding Kayla from the worst the world had to offer. Together, they would navigate this new chapter. Together, they would find their way. The long road ahead. The weeks following their heart-to-heart at the park were filled with both healing and struggle. Each day brought new challenges, but with them came small victories, like the way Kayla smiled a little more each morning or the way she would take Maria's hand as they walked into school, her steps no longer hesitant. They were learning how to navigate this new life together, a life that was still in its infancy, but had already begun to feel like their own. Maria had hoped that the bond between them would become stronger each day, and it did, but it wasn't without its bumps. Kayla's grief was still a shadow that sometimes crept into their moments of happiness, and the quiet fears she carried inside of her sometimes surfaced unexpectedly. Maria had learned to be patient, to give Kayla space when she needed it, and to let her daughter take the lead when it came to her emotions. But there were still days when Kayla would shut down, retreating into herself, and Maria found herself unsure of how to reach her. One such day arrived unexpectedly, a day that began like any other, but quickly grew heavy with unsaid words. It was a Saturday morning, and Maria had planned a simple outing to the local farmer's market. Kayla had been excited about it all week, looking forward to picking out fresh fruit, and maybe even some homemade jam. But as they were getting ready to leave, something shifted in the air. Kayla, who had been all smiles and excitement just the day before, suddenly grew quiet. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her backpack still on her shoulders, her head bent low, staring at her half-eaten cereal. Her normally lively eyes were clouded, distant. Maria paused in the doorway, watching her daughter. "Kayla, sweetie, what's going on?" she asked gently, moving toward the table. Kayla didn't respond immediately. She simply picked up her spoon and pushed the cereal around in her bowl. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy, and Maria could feel the familiar ache in her chest. She had learned that when Kayla went quiet like this, it wasn't always a sign of rebellion or mischief. It was a sign that something was weighing heavily on her heart. "Kayla, honey, talk to me," Maria said, her voice soft but insistent. She reached out and placed a hand on Kayla's, gently turning it over so she could hold it. "I know you're upset about something. What is it?" Finally, Kayla's eyes met hers, and Maria saw the raw, vulnerable pain there. The kind of pain that Maria had feared would resurface as Kayla continued to process her past. I don't know if I'm doing everything right," Kayla murmured, her voice small, almost lost. "I'm scared, Mom. What if I mess everything up? What if I make you hate me?" Maria's heart broke for the little girl in front of her. The weight of the fear Kayla was carrying was so much bigger than her small frame, and for a moment, Maria just sat there, speechless, unsure of how to make it all better. "Oh, Kayla," Maria said, her voice thick with emotion. She slid into the chair beside her daughter, wrapping her arm around her small shoulders. "You are not going to mess anything up. I know it's hard, but you don't have to be perfect. All you have to do is be you." Kayla's brow furrowed, her eyes searching Maria's face for any sign of doubt. "But I'm not perfect, Mom. I don't always feel like I belong here. Sometimes it feels like I don't even know who I am anymore." Maria's heart ached as she listened to Kayla's words. She had known this day would come, the day when Kayla's internal battle would become too loud to ignore. The truth was, Kayla had been through so much, and even though she was safe now, The past had a way of lingering, like a shadow that refused to disappear. "I know you're still figuring things out," Maria said, her voice gentle, yet firm in its conviction. "But that's okay. We don't have to have everything figured out right now. The important thing is that we're here together, and I'm here for you always." Kayla leaned into her small frame trembling slightly as the tears finally began to fall. She hadn't cried like this in a while, and it felt like the dam had finally burst. Maria held her close, rocking her gently as the sobs racked her body. "I just want to make you proud," Kayla whispered between sobs. "I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to lose you." Maria's own tears started to fall as she pressed her lips to Kayla's forehead. "Sweetheart, you can never lose me. You never have to worry about that. You are my daughter, and that means everything to me." As the sobs slowly subsided, Kayla pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "But how do I fix all this? How do I fix the stuff that's already broken?" Maria took a deep breath, holding her daughter's hands in her own. "We don't have to fix everything all at once, Kayla. We just have to take it one step at a time, one moment at a time." Kayla nodded slowly, wiping away the last of her tears. "Okay," she whispered, her voice soft. "I'll try." The quiet moment hung between them, a shared understanding of the road ahead. It wouldn't be an easy road. There would be more hard days, more days when the weight of the past would feel too heavy to carry. But there would also be days of joy, of laughter, of shared victories. There would be days when Kayla would remember how to smile without a hint of fear, when she would no longer carry the weight of her grief alone. They had a long way to go, but they had each other. As they stood up from the table, Maria helped Kayla take off her backpack, setting it aside. The air between them was still thick with unspoken emotions, but it felt lighter now, as though they had cleared a path through the dense forest of Kayla's fears. Maria smiled softly at her daughter, the kind of smile that came from a place deep inside, a place of love that she had come to understand more fully with each passing day. "You know what?" Maria said, her voice light. "I think we should skip the market today. How about we take a trip to the lake instead? Just the two of us. We can bring a picnic and watch the ducks. It'll be a day for just us." Kayla's eyes brightened a little, the corners of her lips twitching upwards. "Really? That sounds fun." "Really," Maria said, standing up and offering her daughter her hand. "Just us. We can make new memories together, ones that are ours." Kayla hesitated for a moment, but then she took Maria's hand, her small fingers curling into her mother's. "Okay, Mom, let's go to the lake." And as they walked out the door, the weight of the day still lingering, Maria knew that despite the difficulties ahead, they had taken another step forward. One step closer to healing. One step closer to becoming the family they were meant to be. The long road ahead would require patience and love, but they would walk it together.